Hey, Seattle, tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
What up, yo? We are back. This is Pep and the man that don't take no mess, Mr. O-P-I-S, Mr. Stevenson. What say you?
I hope you see the hat that I'm wearing right now. That's how mad I am.
I do. Man, you are angry.
I just want to make that be known.
Tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Lidline Sports.
This is a Rainier Avenue radio message on fentanyl awareness in our communities.
Sought out Percocet and from the street dealer, and it was 100% fentanyl, and it instantly killed him.
You've seen young people trying drugs for the first time without realizing they're spending on their drugs, overdose. I see the eyes of the people who I was not able to save. And not only have I seen people out on the streets overdose, but I have friends who have overdosed as well. I don't think people understand how all-encompassing, how fentanyl can take over somebody. They're just not themselves. They're a totally different person. And it's so addictive. They're just chasing their next high.
This has been a Rainier Avenue radio message on fentanyl in our communities.
Rainier Avenue Radio. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Welcome to a pivotal moment in the world of broadcast as we proudly present the Men's Mental Health Show featuring the renowned Larry Mabry in collaboration with the Maassen Group. This essential exploration of men's mental health wouldn't be possible without the invaluable support of RainierAvenueRadio.world. Now, let's dive into this crucial conversation with Larry Mabry and the Maassen Group. Your mental well-being matters. Here's Larry Mabry.
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? April 14th, 2025. Just tapping in with everyone. Hopefully everyone's doing well on this beautiful Monday here in Seattle. Want to thank our friend from Thought Life, Brad. Appreciate that. That was awesome. Just wanted to kind of talk about, I've had a lot of clients kind of reach out to me and say, how do you handle a narcissist, right? And so how do you handle a covert narcissist? So there's different forms of narcissism. And I'll just kind of break it down a little bit. For those individuals who do not know, basically a narcissist is someone who is very self-centered. They have a self-centered type of personality style, marked by excessive preoccupation with themselves, their own needs, often at the expense of others. Kind of a selfish person, I would say. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. You have a normal self-interest, pathological form, caused by significant trauma or problems within relationships and daily functioning. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that. Narcissists basically they have certain traits that they have, and you may be involved with a narcissist. And so I've had a lot of clients kind of reach out and say, hey, how do I deal with this, right? And so let me talk about a couple signs that you may notice. And so some common signs of a narcissist or covert narcissist is basically hypersensitivity to criticism. You have that one individual, you try to give them constructive criticism and they typically spin it and put it on you, or they may basically just kind of get triggered. Often they'll withdraw or sulk or have emotional type of distress rather than, really deal with it and laugh about it and say, you know what, you're right. Or sometimes they'll just get belligerent or angry, so this is a particular sign when people are very hypersensitive to criticism. Also, too, passive aggressive behavior. They frequently express anger or resentment indirectly. Sometimes, people use a lot of sarcasm, the silent treatment or subtle digs instead of direct confrontation. That's a level of narcissism. The biggest thing is lack of empathy. And empathy is basically having that emotion to just kind of connect with people. And despite sometimes appearing emotionally, and it's a thing that's kind of tricky because a covert narcissist could actually act as though they are being sensitive, but they're really good actors. And so But you can kind of tell, right? And so, they lack empathy. They may dismiss or minimize other people's feelings or needs. And emotionally unavailable is a big thing. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that. So you may have an issue where, you talk to somebody and it's like there's no connection. And it's not to say that these people are bad people. It's just that a lot of times they may have had certain traumas and may not have known how to kind of work through that. They have number 4, I would say, is chronic envy or victim mentality. That's a big thing, right? So they often feel envious of other people. And basically due to other people's success or happiness, and they may see themselves as perpetual victims, believing that they're unappreciated or misunderstood. And so, if you have an individual out here, a friend of yours, that's always in the victim mentality, woe is me, or jealous of somebody, or struggling with, allowing other people to win, that may be indication that there might be a covert narcissist. Self-deprecation or insecurity. Unlike overt narcissists, a covert narcissist may present as shy or insecure or self-doubting, often fishing for reassurance or sympathy. So you have to be careful because, you may think the person is shy, but they actually have the, I would say, ill intentions. And so it's important to be mindful of people's intentions. They have this need for validation or admiration. They crave recognition or validation, sometimes using a woe is me approach to elicit attention and praise. So how many people do you know who have that type of mentality? Again, this isn't judgment. This is just to kind of educate people so that we can work on strategies to work through that. Covert narcissists also, they have what we call manipulation and gaslighting. They may use guilt trips or shame or subtle manipulation to control others, often making their criticism seem like a concern. We like to call that bait and switch, to kind of put the emphasis on certain people rather than themselves. Also, they have a fragile self-esteem. Their self-worth is unstable and easily threatened. So they lead to mood swings, anxiety, or depression when they feel slighted or ignored. So think about some times where maybe you reached out to somebody, you're just like they're unavailable or they have an attitude or mood swings and things of that nature. Number 9, introversion and withdrawal. So they may appear reverse or use reverse psychology or social awkwardness, using the introversion to mask their sense of superiority or to avoid accountability. Big thing. And so why am I talking about this? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that are struggling with dealing with people with these particular instances. It's like, how do you work through it, right? They blame others. Covert narcissists, they rarely take responsibility for their actions. They often blame others for their own mistakes or shortcomings. These traits are often subtle, but can be difficult to spot, especially compared to the more obvious behaviors of overt narcissists. So I just want to kind of talk about that. And so as we talk about these things, my question is, okay, so how do we handle, right? What are some strategies we could use to handle these covert narcissists? So the first step I would say is set clear boundaries, right? Really, really important. And so I want to kind of bring it to light. Like I've had instances where I've dealt with individuals who are narcissists. And so typically what I notice is if you're an empath, and that's a person who can kind of feel other people's emotions, you typically attract a narcissist, right? And the work that I do, work with a lot of people, have a lot of empathy, I tend to attract individuals who are narcissists. And so I would say I'm pretty astute as far as kind of making sure I feel them out. And so the biggest thing is you want to make sure you set clear boundaries, clearly define what behaviors are unacceptable, and communicate your limits using specific examples. For example, I feel disrespected when you talk about me like that. If that happens again, I'll limit our time together. Only sets consequences you're prepared to enforce. And so I want to talk about that. But what I noticed too is sometimes, when you have these narcissists, because they could be family members, energetically you can feel it, right? You know how like when you walk in a room and you just feel the whole energy shift, right? It's like, how do you handle that? And so sometimes you just have to kind of bring your energy in and just kind of focus on yourself. I had one instance where I was working with a narcissist, and what I realized for them is they liked a lot of validation, right? I would be talking to an individual, having a conversation, and they would always impose themselves in a conversation where it had nothing to do with them. And then when I would communicate certain things, they would like to bully. That's a quality I would notice too. They like to bully people, again, because they have this inflated ego and think they're better than other people. And I would have to kind of communicate certain things to the individual. But one thing that's really powerful too, when you're dealing with a narcissist, is they like to do a lot of arguing sometimes. And so what I noticed, something that I've used has been very powerful, is to say nothing, right? And I like to look at it like, if you look at it in terms of a fire, fires basically, they need oxygen to burn, right? And the more oxygen you give the fire, it burns, right? And so when you're dealing with a narcissist, they kind of need your energy to kind of blow up, right? And so if you take the energy away, or if you're silent, or you're quiet, or you stick to yourself and they don't have anything to work with, they basically implode. And so I would say try that strategy. It takes a lot of self-discipline, but you can tap in. I can show you how to do that. Okay, another thing too is expect manipulation and passive aggression. So when you're dealing with a covert narcissist, they're always going to manipulate. Again, their sense of, I would say, their sense of entitlement. So they want to manipulate to get their way, because again, they're coming from a selfish point of view where they cannot see other people's point of view. So therefore, they're going to be very manipulative to get people to see things their way. So covert narcissists may respond to boundaries with subtle retaliation, again, because you set a boundary, you're honoring yourself, but they don't really care about that. It's all about what they want. And so they may do certain types of subtle retaliation, emotional withdrawal, or passive aggressive type behavior. They may get mad, get angry, act like a little kid, pouting, that type of thing. And again, the whole guise is to get your attention. So recognize these patterns and avoid taking them personally. That's a big thing. You can't take it personal. If you're coming from a place where, you want to kind of handle things rationally, you can throw that all out the window, because that won't happen. You just have to say, you know what? Oh, I see they're trying to play a game, and you choose not to play the game. And in that way, basically, they self-implode. Another thing too is you want to stay calm and emotionally neutral. That's a really, really big thing, because a narcissist, what they do is they want to feed off your emotional energy. And so when you're calm, you don't respond, you don't react emotionally, you don't give them any provocations, no facial expressions, you remain calm, you say I statements and express your feelings about your specific feelings. You avoid dramatic reactions, because again, they're trying to utilize your energy. And so the more animated you are, it gives them a sense of power, like they're controlling you, right? And so the less emotional energy you give that individual, the more power you keep to yourself, and you can avoid dramatic reactions. And you'll notice that they'll respond, energetically with a lot of energy and, being upset and that type of thing. But you can just kind of observe, right? And realize that that's their issue, has nothing to do with you. Also, too, you want to pick your battles. Not every issue is worth addressing. Focus on matters that are genuinely important, that impact your well-being, and let minor provocations go. Very, very important, because a lot of times, for a narcissist, they just want attention, and it doesn't matter. It's any kind of attention, right? You say yes, they want to say no. You say up, they want to say down, right? And it's a lot of times it's for attention. Or if you're communicating something, you're meaning something from your heart, they don't really care about that, because they don't have any empathy. So they're just going to express whatever they want to express, again, for attention or validation. And so the fact that you're engaging them in a conversation, that's going to get them excited. And guess what? You're giving them more validation. So another method too is you can use what we call the gray rock method, where you minimize your emotional engagement and act uninterested, right? To reduce the narcissist's interest in provoking you. And so by that, basically, going back to what I said before, give them no oxygen to burn, right? And so typically when a person's heated, you get heated, and the next we know, boom, both of you guys are exploding, and then there's an argument, right? And then it's a battle of the wills or the egos. But if someone says, oh, you did this wrong, you say, okay, interesting, right? Or say, oh, that's interesting. A lot of times you come up with neutral statements like, oh, that's some interesting data. Oh, you know what? Thanks for sharing. Keep things very neutral. I never thought of it like that. Thanks for sharing. Whether you agree or disagree, just keep it very neutral. And that kind of minimizes that, because they're not getting that energy. Remember, they're feeding off you. And so if you give them nothing to feed off, then guess what? You keep the power to yourself. Also, too, a big one, follow through consistently. Enforce consequences every time a boundary has been crossed. And do not make empty threats, as inconsistency undermines your position. And so a big thing that I've done that's been very powerful, and you'll find that this is powerful because typically when you starve a narcissist, what happens is, guess what? They don't want to spend any time around you. So you basically remedy the problem, because again, you're like a supply to the narcissist. And so if they get an emotional response for you, that gives them fuel. But if you minimize that emotional response, or you cut down the particular oxygen to allow them to burn, to take your energy away, then guess what? They win. But if you say, you know what, I noticed they're playing this game and I'm not going to fuel up this fire. I'm going to keep it to myself. I'm going to not respond because I see what they're doing. Then guess what? They want to be around you less and less. Why? Because you're not pouring into their validation that they want for themselves. Okay. Another thing too, seek support and reality checks. So talk to a trusted friend, a family member, a therapist, individual like myself, to validate your experiences and maintain perspective. Because a lot of times too, what will happen is covert narcissists will try to get flying monkeys or people around them to kind of go and align with what they're saying. And so, how when you're in a classroom and everyone agrees, it goes back to that, what I like to call the mob mentality. We have a lot of people agreeing, whether you agree or disagree, guess what? You're going to feel outnumbered, which is basically going to kind of make you feel a little less about yourself, even though you may be correct. And so make sure you seek support and reality checks to make sure that you get certain strategies. You can talk to a trusted advisor or friend to help you work through that. Because a lot of times, those resources can be very beneficial, but also give you another aspect that you never considered. The biggest thing I would say that a narcissist can help you learn, and this is the part that I really appreciate about narcissists, is they realize that at the end of the day, it's always about you. So they teach you how to prioritize self-care. That's really important. And so when you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, when you have a narcissist in your life, remember, they want the validation. And so when you change that around, change that narrative, and you put the validation on you, then you realize that you're the most important person, right? So what does that mean? That means that you need to go for walks more, right? You prioritize your emotional health, right? It helps build your resilience. You become more resilient. You limit contact and create distance between that particular person, right? You protect your well-being, right? You tell the universe as well as yourself that, hey, I'm important. And so now I'm going to do things to make sure that I'm taking care of and valuing myself. You don't need any validation for anybody else. This is self-validation for yourself. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, you're noticing that someone is crossing those boundaries, you can say, oh, you know what? I need to keep it to myself. Or if you notice that someone is crossing the boundaries and they're constantly communicating to you, I know society may say, oh, that's kind of weird if you just get up and walk away. However, if you feel like someone's crossed the boundaries, you're totally in alignment to just get up and walk out, right? At the end of the day, you control you. And you're never being disrespectful if you walk out and you honor your boundaries. Because at the end of the day, if you don't honor your boundaries, who will? Okay. The biggest thing too is don't expect validation. That's a big, big, big clue there. Covert narcissists, they rarely acknowledge your reality or need. So whatever you need, pretty much they can't see it because it's always about their selfish desires. And so you want to advocate for yourself, but do not expect them to change or validate your feelings. Really, really important. And so what that means is if you're validating your feelings with pretty much everything you do, then people outside of you that validate your feelings, that's just added icing on the cake. But it doesn't really mean anything because at the end of the day, you're responsible for yourself. So you need to validate your feelings, right? And unfortunately, what they do is they use that as a tool to manipulate you. So if you allow other people to validate your feelings, then they manipulate you. You may say, what do you mean? Well, let's talk about it. Think about commercials. When you're watching a commercial, what is the objective to the commercial? The objective for the commercial is to get you to think to yourself, I would feel so much better if I had this purse, if I had this particular shoe, if I had this particular shirt, things of that nature. They're basically trying to manipulate you to purchase that particular item. At the end of the day, you came in this world butt-a naked, okay? You're going to roll out butt-a naked, okay? So whatever you wear really doesn't constitute who you are. But unfortunately, you know, we look around society, we look at these class levels, hypothetical class levels, and we think, oh man, you know, I've arrived if I have this particular car, or if I have this particular, you know, Fendi bag, or if I have this particular style, I am this person. However, at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter, right? It's all about how you feel about yourself, right? You think about it from a spiritual standpoint, you know, Jesus wasn't bragging about Birkenstocks, right? So it was all about what? Connecting with the Spirit, connecting with the Father. And unfortunately, we get caught up on material, and that becomes our God. And it can kind of be a little bit confusing because, you know, our friends want this, we desire this, we kind of look outside ourselves, and we kind of get caught up on things that are really not important. So think about that. So making sure that you validate yourself every single day, making sure you have self-actualizing things you're saying to yourself, positive affirmations, self-love types, action steps, things of that nature that you're showing self-validation to yourself. All right. Another thing too, encourage professional help if you need to, right? If possible, suggest therapy, suggest reaching out to a professional like myself, talk to somebody, recognize that you didn't do anything wrong. A lot of times, you know, these individuals, they're very, very smooth, right? You can build relationships with these individuals. You can have families with these individuals. You know, they could be people in the family. And we don't know what we don't know. And so for me, I wanted to bring this out because I was involved in the past, I would say, with quite a few narcissists. And it's like, you feel like you're struggling, right? Because it's like, man, can they feel me? Can they relate to me? Well, at the end of the day, unfortunately, they can never feel with you because unfortunately they have a low self-esteem and they hide it typically in these positions that they have. And so am I saying that everyone who has positions are narcissists? No, I'm not saying that. Everyone has their particular focus that's important to them. However, if you're noticing some of these qualities that I mentioned before, then chances are you're dealing with a covert narcissist, right? And the biggest thing is if you notice that someone's like extremely selfish, right? That would give you an indication that that person is a narcissist. And so I want to kind of address that for a second. I feel like it's important to make sure you have a lot of self-love. And so depending on how you look at that, that could appear as though you're being selfish. However, here's where it's a little bit different. Do you have any empathy? Do you care about people, right? If a person is in desire for something and you're doing it from the goodness of your heart, as opposed to doing it to get a gain out of it, that lets you know if a person's a narcissist or not. Typically, a narcissist, they don't have any empathy. And so, unfortunately, they can't really connect. Again, a lot of it is the facade perception because of certain things, material things, because they get their sense of purpose with those things. And so just wanted to kind of present that to you guys to be mindful moving forward. Did you think this was beneficial? Right? Have you experienced any narcissists in your life? Right? Help me out. You know, reach out to me. Let me know. Was this pretty beneficial? Have you noticed people that's been hypersensitive to a certain criticism? Reach out to me, the Maassen Group 1@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out and say, hey, yeah, this is really helpful. Have you noticed people have been a little bit passive aggressive towards you? People who lack empathy, or people who are chronically showing envy or victim mentality towards you or other coworkers, right? Self-deprecation or insecurity. And it's weird. Like, we all have an area of growth that we're all working through, right? Like, no one's arrived. We're all working on it. But when a person can't really be honest with that, like, hey, I know I'm a few pounds, I'm working on it, I'm not insecure with it, it's an area of growth, but I can be honest with that, right? And so typically with a narcissist, there's an area that they can't really be honest. And so I wanted to kind of share this story. I was involved with a woman way back in the day. And this was a definite indicator. We were sitting there watching a movie, having a good old time, you know, and it's like, you know how sometimes your stomach may get a little bubbly and, you know, somebody might pass some gas and you're like, oh, you know, just say, excuse me, it's all good. You know, you're around family, it happens. And, the young lady was like, that wasn't me. And I'm like, what? What you mean? What you mean it wasn't you? And she was like, that wasn't me. And I'm like, man, come on. You got to be honest. Like, if I passed gas, I would have just said, yo, my bad. You know what I'm saying? But this particular individual could not be honest when it was obviously apparent that, she passed some gas. And so that was, to me, that was definitely an indicator, that I needed to sever the relationship. And I'm bringing this up because a narcissist cannot be honest, even with things that are blatantly obvious. And you got to ask yourself, okay, we all pass gas. Like, why can't you be honest with that? And she did not want to step down off of that particular mountain. And she was like, nope, it wasn't me. And I'm looking at her like, dude, like, if you passing gas and you can't be honest on that, like, how are we going to build? Like that's a natural situation. Like, that's like the epitome of living. Like, come on, like, you got to be real with that. And because of that, basically I had to sever the relationship because there was other instances where my spidey senses or my intuition was speaking. And I was like, yo, I'm feeling some things. And because I knew that something simple she wouldn't be honest on, she pretty much sealed her fate, let me know, you know what, I can't really trust you. And so does this mean that all narcissists are dishonest? Well, yes and no. And so let me clarify that. They can't be honest with themselves. So at the end of the day, how can they be honest with you? Right. And granted, we all have a certain aspect of ourselves that we hide, that we don't, put out there. That's true. However, if somebody call us out or we're trying to build, at some point we should be honest with ourselves. And I would say a narcissist is very challenging for them to have an intimate relationship because they can't be intimate with themselves. And so how can you have an intimate relationship with someone else if you can't be honest with yourself because you loathe yourself? So that would be tough. So anyway, wanted to put that out there. Make sure you guys tap into Earth Day. Earth Deserves More Than a Day. That's going to be from April 21st, next week, next Monday, through April 26, 2025. Going to be here at Columbia City Theater and online. And guess what, guys? It's free for all. So make sure you guys check out earthdeservesmorethanAday.org. It's going to be volunteers here at Skyway Park, environmental talks. It's going to be youth night. It's free for all. So make sure you guys tap in. Let me see. Monday, there's going to be Tony B and Lavera Brown. Earth Day is going to be on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we're going to have some equitable and accessible outdoor type spaces. On the Thursday, there's going to be different speakers coming through. So make sure you guys take a look at it. Communities and Clean Water. Cool event. There'll also be closing ceremonies on the 25th from about 5:30 to 7:30. Live performances, games, network, drinks, and refreshments. Volunteer event will be on Saturday the 26th. So make sure you guys bring your family down and check it out. I think you guys have a lot of fun. All right. And as we close, make sure you guys tap into my next guest. She'll be on the next show, Better Together, Living Powerfully. Make sure you guys check out Dr. Tracy Harrell from 6 to 7. Check her out, see what's going on. And I'm just curious to see what you guys think about as far as what we talked about as far as the narcissist, if you guys think this is beneficial. I think it was important to kind of talk about it as we roll into the spring months. Looking forward to talking a little bit more about maybe different other forms of narcissism, or if you guys are interested in talking about some different types of disorders, feel free to reach out and let me know. Okay, guys. So without further ado, I'm going to say peace, and we'll see you guys next Monday.